What's up, my guys? What's up, my girls? AKA my dear and beloved Danny Flores. Welcome back to the Danny Flow Podcast. On the Danny Flow Podcast, we talk philosophy of life. In this episode, we're going to talk about the difference between sex and love through the teachings of Fulton Sheen in his first chapter of his great work, 3 to Get Married. So if you like the video, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe. If you're listening on Anchor or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast. That way you can stay up to date on new episodes. Cool. So, what's the difference between love and sex? Sex and love. Everyone has a philosophy of love. Everyone has a philosophy of sex. So what is Fulton Sheen's philosophy on love and sex, and why should we care what Fulton Sheen thinks about love and sex? Well, in philosophy, we like to define things. We like to know the difference between things. We like to make distinctions. We like to know what a thing is essentially, what makes that thing and not another thing, if that makes any sense. So when we talk about love, do we know what we're talking about? When we talk about sex, do we know what we're talking about? In my opinion, Fulton Sheen knew what he was talking about, which is interesting because Fulton Sheen, presumably from the time that he was ordained priest to the time that he died, 60 years, he was a celibate, constant, chaste man. What does that mean? He was celibate. He neither got married nor had kids. He was constant. He didn't have sex. And he was chaste, which means that he did not abuse or misuse his body in an impure, unchaste, immodest way. What do I think Fulton Sheen's strongest point is in this first chapter? If you think about it, it's a bold way to start off a book. I'm going to tell you the difference between love and sex, right? So I think Fulton Sheen's strongest point is that, quote, love in a monogamous marriage includes sex, but sex in the contemporary use of the term does not imply either marriage or monogamy, unquote. But why do I think that this is Fulton Sheen's strongest point? Well, I think this is Fulton Sheen's strongest point because today sex is seen as a hobby instead of the physical expression of love in monogamous marriage. Can you do a hobby by yourself? Yes. And if sex is like a hobby, then that's masturbation. Can you do a hobby with another person? Yes. And if sex is like a hobby, then that's casual sex, also known as hooking up. Can you do a hobby with another person just one time? Yes. And if sex is like a hobby, then that's called a one-night stand. Can you get paid for a hobby? Yes. And if sex is like a hobby, then that's prostitution and pornography. Can you do a hobby with more than one person? Yes, you can. And if sex is like a hobby, then that's a threesome or an orgy. None of these include love, marriage, or monogamy. I think this treatment of sex as a mere hobby has given many of us a lot of pleasure, but that pleasure has come with a cost. What's the cost? We have the pleasure, right, in the moment of the pleasure, but after that moment, we are in wrong relationship with God. We're in wrong relationship with every person we had sex with as a hobby, and we're in wrong relationship with ourselves, right? It's almost like we have, like, all of our relationships are wrong. It's almost like we just don't have relationships. And I think this quote by Fulton Sheen sums it up nicely. Quote, sex is moved by the desire to fill a moment between having and not having, unquote. So when we realize that we're using and being used just to switch that moment for us or for somebody else, right, between not having sex and having sex, it should make us feel abused, should make us feel angry and insulted, right? So What's the difference between just sex and sex in love in a monogamous marriage? In just sex, right, you have the sex and then you no longer care about the person. The next time you care about that person is when you want sex again. And you go to them, and the only reason you go to them is because in the past they've given it to you, right? But if you go to them again and ask for it in some way, maybe verbally, right? Maybe you make some sort of advancements, right, to communicate non-verbally that that's what you want, right? But they don't give it to you, then you no longer care about that person, and you'll care about the person that will give it to you instead of them. But you'll only care about that person for as long as they give it to you, right? But in love in monogamous marriage, after you've expressed that love in sex, you don't really care that you don't have the sex anymore, because you still have the person, right? The person that you love, the person that you're in this monogamous relationship with, right? And you cared about the person before the sex, during the sex, after the sex. It's always been about the person. Loving the person includes sex, but sex doesn't include loving the person, doesn't even include caring about the person, because you replace them once sex is no longer offered. Or, as Fulton Sheen put it, quote, "In the woman, this sadness is due to the humiliation of realizing where marriage is only sex, her role could be fulfilled by any other woman. There is nothing personal, incommunicable, and therefore nothing dignified." Unquote. Thanks for watching, my guys and my girls. Thanks for putting up with me. I'm aware that I'm hella weird, but you like it. So like and comment below. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. And as always, my dear and beloved Danny Flores, remember what Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen taught us: your life is worth living. Love you, my guys and my girls. Bye.